of counsel and fortitude. Let the light of your divine wisdom direct their plans and endeavors, so that with your help we may attain our just objectives. With your guidance, may all our endeavors tend to peace, social justice, liberty, national happiness, the increase of industry, sobriety, and useful knowledge. We pray, O God of mercy, for all of us, that we may be blessed in the knowledge and sanctified in the observance of your most holy law, that we may be preserved in union and in that peace which the world itself cannot give. And after enjoying the blessings of this life, please admit us, dear Lord, to that eternal reward that you have prepared for those who love you. Amen.
Oath of allegiance of a new senator.
Madam Clerk, kindly administer the oath of allegiance to the new senator.
I, Kerm Timbrell, do swear that I will bear true faith and allegiance to Belize. I will uphold the Constitution and the law, and that I will conscientiously, impartially, and to the best of my ability discharge my duties as a senator and do right to all manner of people without fear or favor, affection or ill will. So help me God.
Congratulations to you, Senator Kerm Timbrell, and welcome to today's sitting.
Announcement by the President.
First, on July 7th, 2025, I conducted a walkthrough of the renovation project of the National Assembly to see firsthand the progress of the project and to see where it was possible the incorporation of the recommendations of the House Committee of the Senate. I'm pleased to report that the project is scheduled to be completed in September 2025, and most of the recommendations of the House Committee have been considered. I will continue through the House Committee to be established today to keep you informed of progress of the project. I want to express my thanks to the project engineers of the Ministry of Infrastructure and Housing Development, Mr. Huron and Mr. Montero, as well as the staff of the National Assembly, Ms. August and Mr. Grant, for facilitating the walkthrough. Honorable members, in accordance with Standing Order 64, there shall be the following sessional select committees: A, the Standing Orders Committee; B, the House Committee; C, the Committee of Privileges; and D, the Regulations Committee. Except for the Constitution and Foreign Affairs Committee, which consists of all members of the Senate, the members of the sessional select committees shall be appointed by the President at the beginning of each session. Standing Orders 65, 66, and 67 state that the President shall be a member and the chairperson of the Standing Orders Committee, the House Committee, and the Committee of Privileges. I therefore name the following senators to be members of the following committees. 1. The Standing Order Committees: Honorable Carolyn Trent Sandiford, President, Chairperson; Senator the Honorable Linsford Castillo; Senator the Honorable Patrick Farber; and Senator the Honorable Janelle Chinona. 2. House Committee: the Honorable Carolyn Trent Sandiford, President, Chairperson; Senator the Honorable Rosella Rana; Senator the Honorable Patrick Farber; Senator the Honorable Kevin Herrera. 3, Committee of Privileges. The Honorable Carolyn Trent Sandiford, President, Chairperson, Senator the Honorable Brittany Galvez, Senator the Honorable Sheena Pitts, Senator the Honorable Reverend Louis Wade, Jr. 4, Regulations Committee. The Honorable Carolyn Trent Sandiford, President, Senator the Honorable Hector Guerra, Senator the Honorable Gabrielle Zatina, Senator the Honorable Glenfield Dennison. Furthermore, Standing Order 68B speaks of a Women's Parliamentarian Caucus Standing Committee, which was established as a bicameral caucus for all women parliamentarians to consider matters which affect women's rights, gender equality, and other matters connected therewith or incidental thereto. I therefore name the following senators to be members of the Women's Parliamentarian Caucus Standing Committee: the Honorable Carolyn Trent Sandiford, President of the Senate, Senator Brittany Galvez, Senator Roselle Arana, Senator Sheena Pitts, and Senator Janelle Chanona.
Bills brought from the House of Representatives.
I recognize the Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, may I first congratulate Senator Timbrell and welcome him to today's proceedings, and also congratulate all those who have agreed and have been appointed to serve on the standing committees. Madam President, I rise to take charge of the following bills: Central Bank of Belize Amendment Bill 2025, Bail Bill 2025, Law Revision and Law Reform Bill 2025. Madam President, in accordance with Standing Order number 49-1, I move that the bills be taken through all their stages forthwith.
Honorable members, the question is that the bills be taken through all their stages forthwith. All those in favor kindly say aye. Those against kindly say no. The ayes have it.
Motions relating to the business or sittings of the Senate.
I recognize the Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, there is on the order paper the National Assembly Powers, Privileges and Immunities Bill 2025. After discussions with senators, we are not taking charge of it, but I've given my undertaking that during the recess of the Senate, we will have a committee of the Senate at your convenience to go through the bill, all its clauses, so that concerns can be raised. Madam President, I move that at its rising today, the Senate adjourn to a date to be fixed by the President.
Honorable members, the question is that at its rising today, the Senate adjourn to a date to be fixed by the President. All those in favor kindly say aye. Aye. Those against kindly say no. The ayes have it.
Public business, government business motions.
I recognize the Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that whereas Belize and Taiwan enjoy a strong and healthy diplomatic bond, deeply rooted in mutual respect, and share the common values of democracy, freedom, and human rights, and whereas throughout the 36 years of friendship and alliance, Belize and Taiwan have continuously supported and helped each other and closely cooperated in areas of mutual interest, and whereas all bilateral cooperation projects between Belize and Taiwan, including hospital and road construction, renovation of the National Assembly building, urban resilience and disaster prevention, metabolic chronic disease prevention, women empowerment, Mandarin teaching and scholarship program are currently proceeding smoothly. And whereas with Taiwan's assistance, 50 starter homes were completed and handed over in May 2025, and shrimp from Belize will soon be exported to Taiwan, showcasing the strength and depth of the multifaceted partnership between the two nations. And whereas Taiwan is not only a faithful ally and a development partner of Belize, but also an active contributor to addressing pressing global challenges, making it an indispensable member of the global community. And whereas the People's Republic of China has deliberately misused UNGA Resolution 2758 to assert false claims of sovereignty over Taiwan, to isolate Taiwan from the international community and obstruct Taiwan's participation in the UN system and other multilateral fora which stand to benefit greatly from Taiwan's expertise and experiences. And whereas Belize, as a steadfast ally, stands shoulder to shoulder with Taiwan in safeguarding its sovereignty, democracy, freedom, and the right to self-determination of the Taiwanese people, when Taiwan faces the ever-growing military, political, and economic coercion and hegemonic threats from the People's Republic of China. Now, therefore, be it resolved that this Honorable House extends its commitment to the strong and healthy diplomatic bond between Belize and Taiwan and reaffirms its commitment to stand with the people and the government of Taiwan in solidarity to oppose PRC's coercive action and undermine Taiwan's sovereignty, sovereign integrity, democracy, and freedom. Calls upon the international community to reject PRC's distortion of the UNGA Resolution 2758 and its effort to block Taiwan's inclusion in the international system. Expresses its full support for Taiwan's participation in all related international organizations, including the United Nations, the World Health Organization, the International Civil Aviation Organization, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and the International Criminal Police Organization. Be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be presented to President Lai Ching-te of the Republic of China, Taiwan, and to the Office of the Prime Minister as a tangible token of the friendship expressed herein. Madam President, it is the opportunity for this Honorable Senate to reaffirm unequivocally its commitment to the relationship between Belize and the Republic of China, Taiwan. As stated in the motion, the relationship between Taiwan and Belize has stood for some 36 years. It has been built primarily on the basis of a mutual recognition of the right to self-determination, sovereignty, and the fact that we respect human rights and democracy. The relationship between Taiwan and Belize is a living example of two countries that respect the sovereignty of each other, that have mutual interests, and have cooperation programs to pursue those mutual interests. In that regard, Taiwan is a shining example of countries with which Belize has been able to cooperate, redounding to the benefit of Belizeans, whether it is students, whether it is farmers, whether it is people in the IT sector, whether it is the National Assembly. Our relationship on the diplomatic scene has also been very close. And so it's an opportunity for us today to reaffirm our commitment to that relationship. Secondly, Madam President and colleagues, we call on the People's Republic of China to have a more mature, a more enlightened posture with respect to Taiwan. Simply put, Taiwan, the people of Taiwan have a right to self-determination. They have a right to determine their future. They have a right to determine that they wish to exist as a country separate from the People's Republic of China. And we call on the People's Republic of China to desist from the threats and the use of force and the threats of the use of force in relation to Taiwan, and in fact to remove its obstacle to Taiwan fully participating in the international organizations of which Belize is a member. Thank you, Madam President.
I recognize Senator Patrick Forber.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I join with Senator Courtney in congratulating Senator Timberland's appointment this morning, and I also join with him to congratulate members of the Senate Seasonal Select Committees that were appointed this morning. Madam President, with your permission, I will read our statement on this motion for the record, and then I'll make a few personal comments. I rise on behalf of the opposition to give my full and unwavering support to this important motion, a resolution that affirms Belize's commitment to democracy, freedom, and the unbreakable bond of friendship with the people and government of Taiwan. Belize and Taiwan have shared 36 years of strong and meaningful diplomatic ties. But more than that, We have shared a partnership built on mutual respect and shared values, the belief in human rights, self-determination, and democratic government. These are not abstract ideals. They are principles that shape our daily lives and strengthen the foundation of our nation. Madam President, over these decades, Taiwan has been a genuine friend to Belize. Whether it is through the construction of hospitals and roads, support for the National Assembly building renovation, which we will all enjoy in a bit, urban resilience initiatives, or women empowerment program, Taiwan has been a friend, and this is really what friendship looks like. It's tangible, it's impactful, and it's based on shared progress. Madam President, at this moment in history, Taiwan is under increasing threat from the People's Republic of China. The deliberate misuse of the UNGA Resolution 2758 to isolate Taiwan from the international system is an affront not just to Taiwan, but to every nation that believes in fairness and democratic principles. Taiwan deserves to have a seat at the table in global institutions such as the United Nations, the WHO, the ICAO, UNFCCC, and Interpol. Taiwan's expertise and contributions from health to climate change to security strengthen the global community. Denying them, Madam President, the participation only weakens our collective ability to address shared challenges. Madam President, Belize has always stood up for what is right, even when it is not the easy path. By supporting this motion, we reaffirm our steadfast friendship with Taiwan, and we make it clear that Belize will not be silent in the face of coercion and injustice. We stand shoulder to shoulder with Taiwan in defending its sovereignty, its democratic system, and the right of its people to self-determination. This is a moment to demonstrate our moral courage and our commitment to the values we hold dear here in Belize. It is also a moment to call upon the international community to reject the PRC's distortion of UNGA Resolution 2758 and to support Taiwan's inclusion in international forums. Madam President, in closing, I urge all senators to support this motion wholeheartedly. Let us send a very strong and unified message from this Senate that Belize stands for democracy, for freedom, and for the enduring bonds of true friendship. We stand with Taiwan today and always on these matters. Madam President, I think this may be one of the rare occasions when we will stand so strongly together. The opposition and the government, the UDP and the PUP, over the 36 years that both parties have ruled this country, or governed this country is a better way to say it, has seen both political parties, Madam President, embrace Taiwan, and that is a good thing, and we are not about to break that up. We make apologies if there were any inconsistencies or the threat of inconsistencies by our former leader of the opposition. But we make it now clear that this, the United Democratic Party opposition of this country, supports unequivocally Taiwan in its goal of self-determination. But having said that, Madam President, let me also make a plea, because one of the many gifts that Taiwan gives to this country, and you know, I always say the best gifts come from friends, but the best gifts are even further defined, Madam President, by being the kind of gift that once given cannot be taken back. And I've always enjoyed the fact that Taiwan has given us one of the greatest gifts, in my opinion. They give us a lot of things, but one of the greatest gifts that they've given us is access to education for our young people in particular. And this is across many fields, many areas. The problem I've had while I was Minister of Education, and I am assuming my colleagues all in this Senate will agree with me is that maybe we need to continue to press for it, something that I certainly pressed for as Minister of Education, is that we need some greater understanding on ensuring that our students who go to Taiwan to study return to this nation, because it is not an individual gift given to individuals who go to study. It is the intention of both our nations that once our students go, that they will come back and contribute to Belize's development. Now, don't get me wrong, Madam President, I understand very well in the global context that the world is global and that wherever you are, in fact, we have seen some wonderful success stories of Belizeans in Taiwan, living in Taiwan. We've seen wonderful success stories of Belizeans living in the United States, in Canada, in England. And they do make contributions to Belize's development. I've seen where, for instance, students who are studying come home and they have workshops in different areas, or they help to build Belize in some particular way. But there can be no greater contribution than if once they're properly educated, properly equipped, that they come home and they make Belize their home and make the contributions as was intended by the agreements that we have with Taiwan. Now, I know that that is difficult to do. Taiwan is a very, very distant place. And in fact, one of the reasons why students become so acclimatized once they get there is because they don't get to travel home regularly, as is the case if they were studying in the US or in the Caribbean somewhere. They get to trek home regularly. But in this instance, they're so far away that once you go, in fact, many families have not seen their loved one once they've departed to study in Taiwan for years. Sometimes it takes them at least a decade or so to come home. So we understand that, and we understand that they're doing great things in Taiwan for their development, and therefore that helps us. But of course, I make the plea again, and maybe this is something that we could do jointly, opposition and government appeal to the Taiwanese government. We are certain that they listen to our appeals for that kind of thing to be formalized, that our students are forced to come back, at least for a while, so that they can make good on the contributions that they offered to take up once they promised to return when they were given the scholarship. Madam President, I thank you.
I recognize Senator Brittany Galvez.
Madam President, I just want to also add my full support for this motion on the resolution to support democratic Taiwan and strengthen bilateral bond. As we all know, for the past 36 years, Belize and Taiwan have shared a fruitful and enriching friendship, one that has provided tangible benefits for both nations. Speaking from my own experience and through my tenure as a program coordinator for the Office of the Special Envoy, I've had the privilege of working alongside many Taiwanese counterparts on various programs and initiatives, from providing financial literacy training to indigenous women in the South, to empowering young people to be agents of change against gender-based violence. Every program supported by Taiwan has opened doors to both individual growth and national development. And we can't forget the countless young Belizeans who've benefited from studying Taiwan through their scholarship program. Madam President, it is always inspiring for me to hear the testimonies from those who have benefited from the strong diplomatic bond between our two nations. I can't personally thank Taiwan enough for their faithful commitment to empowering our nation and its people. Because over these 3.5 decades, Taiwan has stood with us, not just in development, but in helping us address some of our most pressing challenges. And through this motion, we return and reaffirm that support by standing in solidarity with the government and people of Taiwan as they face ongoing pressures and false claims from the People's Republic of China. And that is why, Madam President, I am encouraged and proud to witness the strong bipartisan support for this important motion, as we send a clear and unanimous statement that Belize fully supports and stands with Taiwan. Not just because they support us, but because, like Belize, they deserve the right to exercise their full sovereignty, democracy, and participation in our global community. Thank you.
I recognize Senator Sheena Pitts.
Good morning, Madam President. Good morning, colleagues. I fully associate myself with the comments made by the leader of government business, the leader of opposition business, and my fellow Senator, Ms. Brittany Galvez. While I don't wish to repeat what they have set out, I wish to go a little bit further. I queried, when Belize and Taiwan engages in its friendly relationship, symbiotic, I asked, how does it come about? Is it that they offer in a targeted way, or is it that we ask in a targeted way? And correct me if I'm wrong, former Minister of Foreign Affairs, oftentimes or mostly it is that we ask in a specific way. And so I ask this on the footing that both Belize and Taiwan can identify in a nerve and flesh impregnable way the observance we have for sovereignty and territorial integrity. And in as much as Taiwan has done its work with countries, Taiwan has established relationships with countries to support its bid for international recognition. There is a country that it supports, that is Guatemala, and that country is the country that challenges our sovereignty, our territorial integrity. And while I am not standing here to impute anything on Taiwan, what I am doing is inviting Taiwan, considering that Belize has taken the steps to go to the ICJ to determine that question, invite Taiwan to consider whether at the end of that, at that time, it can be bold and declare with Belize, so that in our continued sisterhood, there is no question on the bond that binds us together. And the only reason why I say this is that personally, it is marked for me that while Taiwan has been forever in partnership with our countries, with our country despite administration, it would lend a great deal more for our two countries to make those bold statements, shoulder to shoulder, in the very thing we're standing here to support. And that is that we recognize, we support Taiwan's sovereignty, their involvement in the international community, their prerogative to determine and use democratic principles. And for that, we invite them, and perhaps former minister and leader of government business, you can share with us where I am wrong or this is not the appropriate venue, how it is we can invite Taiwan to make those considerations, to go a step further, to hear from them where they stand in relation to our fight for our sovereignty. I yield, Madam President.
Madam President.
I recognize Senator Hector Guerra.
Madam President, I rise to support and to show my unwavering conviction to this resolution to support democratic Taiwan and strengthened bilateral bond 2025. The Taiwanese government has done great things in Belize, including in the agricultural sector, touching the lives of thousands of Belizeans. They've also contributed a lot to the young folks in this country, especially as it relates to education and to opening opportunities for us, Madam President. And so while we've listened to Senator Farber's contributions as it relates to concerns about Belizeans not returning home, and while we've listened to Senator Pitts saying how, of course, a sentiment I also share, we'd want Taiwan to stand with Belize, I'm sure our friends are listening and will take it into consideration, Madam President. But the fact remains, Taiwan has supported us for over 30 decades, and we cannot, 3 decades, I apologize, and we cannot at this point turn our backs on our friends. In a time when Taiwan is facing increasing external pressures, they're being excluded from international forums. Belize's position remains clear and principled. We support Taiwan's inclusion in the international order, including the World Health Organization and the United Nations. And so, Madam President, I rise simply to say, without repeating what has already been said today, that I support this motion. Thank you.
I recognize Senator Kevin Herrera.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, also, I also rise to support the motion, Democratic Taiwan, resolution to support Democratic Taiwan and strengthen bilateral bond motion 2025. Madam President, when you really think of it, or think about it, Taiwan and Belize are circumstantial siblings in many ways. We are threatened by neighbors much larger than ourselves. We have the desire for self-determination, democracy, freedom. These are our shared values. And yet, as we proceed on our path, we continually run into these headwinds that are brought by our larger neighbors. And while Belize has submitted its case to the International Court of Justice, Madam President, it is still something hanging over our heads because it has not been resolved completely. Taiwan wants to participate, like Belize, in many of the international forums. And again, because of the issues that linger from the PRC, it has been unable to do so. Taiwan has been a major friend of Belize for over 36 years, Madam President. And so I think it is only right that Belize continue to support Taiwan in its goal to be recognized internationally. Madam President, if you listen to the news over the past year, 9 months, you'll notice that there seems to be a shift in terms of the global order, where if you look at it closely, it almost seems like we're returning to the laws of the jungle in many respects. We saw Russia moving into Ukraine, taking territory. We've seen Panama being threatened. We've seen insinuations about Canada being one of the states of the United States. And so, Madam President, it's extremely important that these countries, Belize included, Taiwan and the other countries, that we continue to put these types of motions forward so that we maintain the global order as it is, that we don't look at redefining borders, that we allow people to determine their own futures. And so, Madam President, with that said, I completely support the motion in front of us. Taiwan has been a great friend of Belize. Thank you.
I recognize Senator Roselle Arana.
Good morning, Madam President and colleagues. Madam President, I rise in full support, permission to read my notes. I rise in full support of the motion, which is resolution to support democratic Taiwan and strengthening bilateral bond motion 2025. It is in Belize's national interest to continue to be fully supportive of our strong alliance with Taiwan, which has been mutually beneficial for 36 years. You see, Madam President, countries cannot exist in isolation. Maintaining strong alliances is absolutely necessary to thrive and to survive, especially in the midst of global geopolitical tensions, of which some Senator Kevin Herrera mentioned. Hence, our uncompromising support for Taiwan, including their participation in all related organizations, must emphatically be underscored. Once again, I'm in full support of this motion. Thank you.
I recognize Senator Janelle Chanona.
Good morning, colleagues, and I join in the welcome to Senator Timbrell to today's session. And with your leave, Madam President, I would also like to extend our congratulations to Madam Clerk on completing her recent course. Oh, Senator Arana, no worries. Yes, just to tell the clerk, well done on completing her course in distant lands and with us here. Madam President, our community wishes to place on record our support for this motion. We feel it is important to acknowledge not just the gift of friendship that has been shared between these two nations, but also I believe it gives some assurance that as other countries move to change their diplomatic ties, I'm sure it brings measure of comfort that Belize is taking this principled position and seeing itself, as Senator Herrera eloquently described it, circumstantial siblings. And so we just place on record that we embrace. I do not share Senator Farber's position that perhaps this will be a rare bipartisan moment. I will be a little bit more optimistic and just say that this has set a bar, but I look forward to us breaking the bar on future motions and pieces, but certainly to say that we offer our full support as well for this acknowledged principled position in terms of the diplomatic relations. It goes well beyond thank you, and we think it's important that, as we say, we put our action where we can to support our friends. Thank you.
I recognize Senator Gabriel Zadina.
Madam President, I rise on a point of clarification, with the permission to read my notes. I want to set the record straight in case there is any doubt. And truthfully, Madam President, there really shouldn't be any doubt, because from our side, at least I heard my colleague, lead Senator Patrick Faber, Senator Shana Pitts, we've made our position crystal clear, and it was said in English. I don't know if Senator Hector does not, and I don't mean to come at you so bluntly, but I want to put on record that we support the resolution to support Taiwan and strengthen bilateral bond. Full stop. We stand with our friends in Taiwan. That support has been stated plainly from the side of the opposition, publicly and without reservation. Now, Madam President, like I said, I rise specifically to respond to the comments made by Senator Hector, who, in what appears to be typical PUP fashion, has attempted to twist or blur our position. And I like to think that it was done unintentionally. But from our side, again, our position has not changed. It has not been said vaguely. We support Taiwan. We support the motion. And we do so in full recognition of the mutual respect and cooperation that Belize has with Taiwan, and that we continue to share. Thank you, Madam President. I yield.
I recognize Senator Glenfield Dennison.
Obliged, Madam President. He did. Madam President, I wasn't planning on speaking on this motion, but I think it's very important that we get clear to our friends the unanimity of the support that they enjoy from this upper house. And with that in mind, I will ask that we all speak on this motion. For my part, Madam President, I will be very clear. September 21st, 1981 is a very important day in our history. I think we can all agree on that. September 25th, 1981 is also an important day. It's the day George Price was able to address the UN General Assembly in relation to Belize achieving statehood. That is a privilege that one of our friends yet do not have. After 35 years of diplomatic relations with Taiwan, which has seen Belize's development being supported in so many aspects. My friend Senator Galvez spoke about the women empowerment. There's education, military training. The list is so long. Housing, Madam President, a beautiful housing project right here in Baupan. And so we have to appreciate the international context that is occurring now with the Republic of, with China, Madam President, poaching allies, picking off friends of Taiwan one by one. abusing as leader of government business, as the motion says, abusing UNGA resolution 2758, and I think that's an appropriate use of their actions now. Because for all that Taiwan has done, not just for Belize, but for the world, I think it's a shame that they are not permitted to participate in international forums like Interpol and the World Health Organization and the like, Madam President. And so I don't think this is a time to ask our friend when they are down to show us our support. I think this is a time for us to give our unequivocal support to Taiwan, and I rise in full support of this motion, Madam President.
I recognize Senator Kerm Timber.
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning to our other senators before this honorable house this morning. Madam President, with your indulgence, I'd like to make reference to my note that I have here, that we stand in full support of this resolution to support democratic Taiwan and strengthening bilateral bond motion 2025. Madam President, if for no other reason, but for the simple reason that Taiwan seeks to govern its people in principles of democracy, that alone is enough, Madam President. Senator Herrera made mention of some of the troubling things we see coming out of Russia and having support of mainland China in the oppression we see taking place today in the war with Ukraine. We believe on this, Madam President, that the way forward is for all nations to embrace principles of democracy, and for that reason we fully support this resolution. Thank you.
I recognize Senator Linsford Castillo.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome Senator Timbrell to this chamber. Madam President, it would be remiss of me to not speak into the record my support for this. Let me read the bill. Resolution to support democratic Taiwan and strengthen bilateral bond 2025. Madam President, I will also ask your permission to every so often refer to my notes, and I won't be long. Madam President, just as the bill, as it was read by the leader of government business, highlighted many instances and examples of the partnership that Belize and Taiwan has shared since 1989, or 36 years thereabout. So as not to get into any details or not to repeat what has already been stated by many of the senators before me, I would just like to touch very, very briefly on 3 or 4 areas to just highlight why this bill is of utmost importance, Madam President. One, I'd like to look at the relationship that Taiwan and Belize shares, that is rooted in shared values. 2, tangible contributions and development impacts that this relationship has brought about. 3, Taiwan as a global partner. And 4, an appeal to the international community on behalf of Taiwan. Madam President, this resolution affirms that Belize does not take this alliance or this partnership lightly. It is a testament, in my opinion, of the consistency, the integrity, and just that strong bond that has been developed between both nations. We all know that Taiwan has stood by Belize over the years, not only in words, Madam President, but we can all attest, and as I stated before, the evidence is there. And so it is only fitting for us that we reciprocate this unwavering support that we have enjoyed from Taiwan. And so, Madam President, that alone would be suffice for us to support this bill. Secondly, Madam President, in terms of tangible contributions, and again, I won't get into the details because it has been mentioned as far as the many, many projects, whether in health, whether in infrastructure, whether in scholarships, as Senator Farber has mentioned, and even just now as Senator Denison has mentioned about starter homes. The evidence is just clear, Madam President, of this strong partnership. And so with that, we see it fitting that we continue to strengthen this relationship, Madam President. But not only with respect to Belize, but we have seen Taiwan's footprint as a global partner. And so when it comes to global health, when it comes to disaster relief, Madam President, during the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw Taiwan contributing to the global response. And so it is obvious that Taiwan is demonstrating that it is ready to be a formal part of the global community. And so, in closing, Madam President, I want to join with my fellow senators and call upon the international community to reject the misrepresentation, if I could use that term, and the unfair treatment that the people of Taiwan has been subjected to from the People's Republic of China. And so we join our voices to say, let us see Taiwan become a formal and a full-fledged member of the international community. And so, Madam President, this resolution should not only be a policy statement as far as I am concerned, but a promise that Belize will continue to champion democracy, to resist coercion, and to stand up for the rights of all the people, including the 23 million Taiwanese who wish to live in peace and prosperity and freedom, Madam President. And so with that, I proudly support this resolution, and I thank you.
I recognize Senator Christopher Cowie.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I rise in full and unwavering support of the resolution to support Democratic Taiwan and strengthen bilateral bond motion 2025. I think Senator Herrera highlighted that Belize and Taiwan are, in his words, circumstantial siblings. And I think that phrase is entirely appropriate. I just want to focus very strictly on the right of self-determination. Belize undoubtedly has a right of self-determination, one that I think we are all confident will be upheld by the International Court of Justice. But just the same, other people have that right of self-determination. That includes the people of Western Sahara. That includes the people of Palestine. And of course, that includes the people of the Republic of China, Taiwan. It is unfortunate, however, that within the international community, while Belize is able to enjoy that full international recognition, many of the people of these other, or many of the countries in the international community do not recognize these people that I mentioned. In the case of Taiwan, up to the late 60s, Taiwan was actually had a seat on the United Nations. It was recognized by over 70 countries. Now it no longer has that recognition. No longer does it have that seat on the United Nations. In fact, merely a dozen countries recognize Taiwan. Belize is one of those dozen countries. And I think we are all here today united to say that we are proud to be one of those dozen countries. I make my comments here today to recognize the humility and generosity of the people of Taiwan to Belize. But it is not a one-way street, and we should never look at it as a one-way street. It is a relationship of mutual respect and an opportunity for mutual benefit to both our countries. And it is in that sense this motion reflects that effort of mutuality, that in the best way possible we can reflect our support of Taiwan, and this motion represents that. But beyond that, we also look forward to that mutual benefit through trade, through education. We look forward to building a closer relationship, closer ties with Taiwan between our peoples. So I end by simply saying that as far as Belize and Taiwan is concerned, I think that bond is an unbreakable bond and one that will only get stronger. So, Madam Speaker, I fully support this motion. Thank you.
Madam President, I start by thanking all senators for supporting the motion in the very strong and unequivocal way in which they have done so. Madam President, I just wish to respond to a few points, 3 points in particular, and just to remind the Senate that there is a distinction between recognition of a country and having diplomatic relations. Many more than a dozen countries around the world recognize Taiwan. They just don't have formal diplomatic relations. Many countries around the world have trade intersections with Taiwan. They don't have embassies. So Taiwan enjoys the support of many more countries than those that they have diplomatic relations with. Secondly, I want to associate myself with Senator Farber's concern about the need for Belizean students to return to Belize, having received the education that they get in Taiwan. We have engaged the government of Taiwan on this issue, Senator Faber is right to say that these scholarships are scholarships given to Belize. They are scholarships given to Belize. There is then a process that is undertaken to identify who the beneficiaries are. It is not a situation where a student has gone out and applied directly to Taiwan and said, please give me a scholarship. This is a program between two countries, and our Belizean students benefit from it. We have said to the government of Taiwan, it is counterproductive and it is counterintuitive for you to have a relationship with us to promote the development of Belize, to educate our Belizeans, and then, one, to seduce them to stay in Taiwan. Two, to give them education, bachelor's level and master's level, and then give them a work permit to teach English as a second language and allow them to stay, a residence permit in Taiwan. And so we need to continue that engagement with Taiwan to say that you cannot or you should not, except for exceptional circumstances, for example, marriage. Somebody gets married to a Taiwanese or to a person resident there, then clearly you can't force that person to come back. Or secondly, a situation where somebody has a job as a stepping stone to doing a further degree, so they stay and they don't come back immediately. But ultimately, the issue has got to be building the human capital of Belize. And as a true partner, we need to find ways to reduce the number of Belizeans who remain in Taiwan after having the benefit of the scholarship. And finally, just to respond to Senator Pitts, every country that recognizes Belize recognizes Guatemala. Every country that has diplomatic relations with Belize has diplomatic relations with Guatemala. And we shouldn't single out Taiwan to have a different posture. In fact, what we have done and what we will continue to do is to leverage the relationship between Taiwan and Guatemala to assist in good neighborliness, to assist in a peaceful resolution of the dispute between Belize and Guatemala, and most importantly, once we win the case in the ICJ, to ask Taiwan to use its good offices and influence to get the government of Guatemala to support and to accept the result of the ICJ judgment and to implement it. So I think we should not be concerned about the fact that Taiwan has good and friendly relations with Guatemala. We should be able to use it to the benefit of Belize and Belizeans. Madam President, I thank you.
Honorable members, that motion is referred to the Constitution and Foreign Affairs Committee for examination, consideration, and report. I recognize the Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that whereas Standing Order 73A of the Standing Orders of the House of Representatives provides that the Joint Public Accounts Committee shall consist of 9 members as follows. 6 members nominated by a committee of selection to consist of 4 members who support the government and 2 members who do not support the government unless there are no members or insufficient members of the House of Representatives who do not support the government, and 3 members nominated by the President of the Senate from among the social partner members of the Senate. And whereas on the 12th May 2025, the House of Representatives appointed the following 6 members to serve on the Joint Public Accounts Committee: Honorable Lee Mark Chang, Honorable Julius Espat, Honorable Karim Musa, Honorable Kevin Bernard, Honorable Dolores Balaramos Garcia, and Honorable Godwin Haylock. Now therefore be it resolved that the Senate nominates Senator Kevin Herrera, Senator Glenfield Dennison, and Senator Janelle Chanona to be the social partner members in the Joint Public Accounts Committee of the House of Representatives.
I recognize Senator Patrick Faber.
Thank you, Madam President. We, of course, have no difficulty with the appointments, given that it is what is expected for the Joint Public Accounts Committee to function. I just wanted to ask, though, in a similar manner, when I think there was something else that we had to deal with, Madam President, at the last meeting when I asked, how do we come about? Was it the social partners getting together and deciding on the three senators, or was it an imposition? Okay, so I see from the nods and the gestures, Madam President, that it was not so. And so we have absolutely no difficulty in supporting the motion. Thank you.
Honorable members, that motion is referred to the Constitution and Foreign Affairs Committee for examination, consideration, and report.
Bills for second reading.
I recognize the Leader of Government Business.
Senator Faber, I think you will come to understand that our Madam President is very transparent and democratic in the way she operates. She doesn't impose often. Madam President, I rise to move a second reading of a bill for an act to amend Customs and Excise Duties Act, Chapter 48 of the Laws of Belize, Revised Edition 2020, to implement the 11th phase of reduction of duties in accordance with the CARIFORUM EU Economic Partnership Agreement, to implement the 11th phase of reduction of duties in accordance with the CARIFORUM UK Economic Partnership Agreement, to implement the second and third phase of reduction of duties in accordance with the Belize and the Republic of China Taiwan Economic Cooperation Agreement, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto. Madam President, this bill is simply to continue the phase reduction of duties on goods moving into Belize from the European Union, the United Kingdom, and from Taiwan. They exist under the economic partnership agreements which we have with the European Union and the United Kingdom separately, and the economic cooperation agreement with Taiwan. So we are in treaty bound to do these phase reductions, and this is a part of that process.
I recognize Senator Patrick Faber.
Thank you, Madam President. As Senator Courtney has said, we're bound by treaty. And we have no difficulty with that, except that we still would like to know, especially when it has to do with things that could hamper our own productivity in this country. So we're told, Madam President, that what we've signed on to, CARIFORUM UK, CARIFORUM EU, and the Republic of China Taiwan Economic Cooperation Agreement, in fact, we're told that this is the 11th phase, Senator, for the two, for UK and Europe, and the third phase for Taiwan. We are not certain, and maybe you can enlighten us, Senator Courtney, once you get up to wrap up the debate. What have been the benefits that Belize has received in terms of those earlier phases, which this, well, you know, Madam President, I told Senator Courtney this morning that I guess it's a difference in how things are done, the House versus the Senate, and I really am learning. And by the way, what you just said in terms of how Madam President and other senators conduct business is a learning curve for me, because you can't suggest things in the House for change. That would be rejected. They don't even listen to you. They don't even hear you. And certainly from my first and only experience in the last meeting of the Senate, when it was the budget debate, I can say, without holding anything back, that minus the skirmishes and so on, that especially for the leader of government business and our friend Senator Chris Curry, that they make an attempt to try to give us the information that we need. And to me, that's a far look up from where I have to say up. No, you say we are the upper house. But we'd like to know then what those earlier phases yielded, since we are now being asked to put on this list additional goods, services that will, of course, give up very, very important revenue for our country. I had a chance to quickly glance at the IMF's summary report published on the IMF's webpage on Friday, I believe it was, and while it's something we've long said, Senator Koye, that we enjoyed the glory days, we'll have to tighten the belt now. And so something like this, of course, forces us to have to ask the question, what is it that, how is it going to balance out? And I think it's a fair question, especially given that we are in the 11th phase of our agreement with the UK and with Europe, and the 3rd phase with Taiwan. In particular, Madam President, there are things in this bill that threatens our local production. If we look at detailed amendments in Schedule 1, we see drastic reductions in duties on agricultural and fisheries products. We see drastic reduction in live cattle, live swine, live sheep, goats, as well as fish and other seafood categories, Madam President. And we see some goods dropping from where they are to 7%, while others drop as low as 0%. So again, it sends a signal that we're going to lose some revenue from this, and if the benefits that are coming don't outweigh what we're giving up, then we will find ourselves, as the IMF is warning, in some serious times. We must ask, Madam President, how will the local cattle and pig farmers in Cayo and in Orange Walk compete with large-scale European and Taiwanese imports that benefit from heavy subsidies in their own countries? Our farmers already struggle with high cost of feed, limited veterinary services, and poor infrastructure. Without targeted support, and that's the recommendation that we're making here as well, because I think my experience is you have to be clear on these things, because people jump to conclusions afterwards. We are already engaged with the treaty. You heard us loud and clear just now, and I thank my colleague Senator Gabriel for clearing up whatever doubt Senator Gear, which I didn't think was intentional, but whatever the brother seemed to have hinted that we were not on board fully, and so you get my colleague riled up a little bit here, because he had to make the clarification that Belize is with Taiwan. And again, this is one of the elements where we know a write-off without hearing, and we're asking for the record, but even without hearing from Senator Courtney what the benefits of Phase 1 and Phase 2 were in terms of the Taiwan agreement, we believe that it was beneficial to Belize. And even if it is some loss of revenue, you see where other things make up, and I'm not sure we have the same kind of relationship with the other two partners who we are engaging with in terms of these agreements, Europe and in particular the UK, which has now separated itself from the UK. The UK separating itself from the European Union. But I would hope that what we have engaged in, again, is to the greater benefit of our country, and that there are ways of us regaining what has been lost in these areas. Madam President, we have concerns as well about food security and food sovereignty as it relates to these agreements. This bill risks us undermining local food production. Belize has prided itself on being able to supply its own markets with fresh produce, from citrus in Stan Creek to beans and corn in Corozal. If local farmers abandon production because they cannot compete, we will become dependent on external food sources, global supply chain disruptions, and as we experienced during COVID-19, and it showed us how dangerous our dependency can be. By the way, I was encouraged, leader of the government business, by what has come out of CARICOM in terms of putting together an arrangement for cargo transportation. At least it's a start. I'm told it is being proposed at this time between Barbados and Guyana, with the hope for Trinidad to join, and it is the hope that it can be extended to the entire Caribbean region, which will help to cement the whole CARICOM region, which will help to cement the goods and services that our regional community really needs. But we would want to also make sure, despite those efforts being made by CARICOM, that we also are taking care of ourselves at home. The best people to provide for our people here in Belize are Belizeans. And yes, we have an obligation to try to help other nations, but our first call should be to make sure that we are self-sufficient here at home. And so I'm hoping that there can be some clarification as to the comfort that will come to our producers in these areas that I'm mentioning, to ensure that the fears and the concerns that I'm raising do not happen. I'm not sure, and maybe Senator Herrera can fill us in, about any kind of consultation that took place. And while we understand, with the business community, in particular the Chamber of Commerce, the Belize Agro-Productive Sector Group, National Fishermen's Cooperatives, Producers Cooperative, what kind of consultation was done? We are well into the agreement, 11 phases for EU and the UK, and the third phase for Taiwan, but I wonder what kind of, but you may be right. It may have started under the UDP, but times, is that what you said? Is that what you're hinting to? You need to whisper more delicately, and your mic wasn't on. But it does not matter when it got started, and there might have been consultations back then, but the times have changed. The demands on our productive sector have increased, and it's a very, very different time. I'm sure all in this honorable Senate will agree that it can't be the same thing. So rather than assuming that it's a treaty, we are all already bound to it, and I understand that to an extent, we must also, again, re-engage the partners. I'm sure that the Belize Chamber of Commerce would love that. And of course, everybody, even the opposition, would love that consultation, rather than just coming to the National Assembly, be it the House of Representatives, Madam President, or this Honorable Senate, to say, listen, well, you all know we already signed on to these treaties, so we have to just bite the bullet and go with it. I think it can help as well the partners who also play a role, Madam President, to ensure that there is a softening, if you will, of the effects of this kind of action, to help them to better prepare, to help them to know what is to come. Because the players in business and in the productive sector go and come every day. Those players that might have been in place at the time of its putting in 11 years, was it an annual phasing in? So 11 years ago, might have been different players, or maybe there are new players who will definitely need to know what to expect in terms of these agreements. And so, Madam President, we ask the government to do that kind of consultation where possible. Just a few recommendations and amendments, some of which I might have already gone through, Madam President, but let me put it on the record. And again, I state my joy, if you will, Senator Courtney, on the understanding my colleague who has been here before in the Senate assures me that this is the kind of place that they listen to your recommendations, and I will concede that I have experienced a bit of that already, as I've said earlier. But I'm hoping that our contributions, although we have said we agree, and you'll find that about this opposition bench, that when we agree, there might be things that we want to recommend to improve the bill, to improve whatever is being proposed. It does not mean, my friend Senator Guerra, that we are opposing. And sorry, I wanted to say to Senator Chanona as well that my comments this morning about Taiwan was that it is probably the strongest occasion for us to agree on something. It's not that we would, I didn't expect us to agree from time to time as we are doing this morning on these bills. From what I gather, there are very few that we would oppose, and you will hear us when we don't agree. But can we propose then, Madam President, the insertion of a clause requiring impact assessment and support measures for our agricultural, fisheries sectors, that within 6 months they present some kind of support plan to further duty reduction, when these duty reductions are enforced. May we recommend as well, Madam President, that Schedule 1 be amended to provide for extended timelines on the most vulnerable sectors, specifically for those heading under Chapter 1, live animals, fish and crustaceans, and 7 and 8, vegetables and fruits. Duty reductions we are recommending, Madam President, could be phased in over a longer period to allow for local producers to adapt to these changes that will be coming. May we recommend as well, Madam President, the insertion of a provision similar to safeguard clauses on international trade agreements allowing Belize to temporarily reinstate higher duties on specific items if imports threaten local industry viability. Indeed. May we suggest, Madam President, as well, that the government earmarks revenue to support local capacity, mandate that a portion of our revenues that are collected on remaining duties be reinvested directly into the agricultural modernization of our country, invested in our fisheries sustainability programs, and also, Madam President, for export promotion. So we put our money where our mouth is to strengthen, beef up the areas that we will lose some revenue from, but that revenue contribution to those areas, of course, will make us stronger. Madam President, we do not, again, oppose trade. We do not oppose, for the record again, honoring agreements made by the government, especially when it was done under the UDP administration. But if it was a mistake, it was a mistake. We don't have a problem saying that. We're not saying that in this instance. We oppose, Madam President, sorry, and I was doing so well. We oppose, Madam President, sacrificing Belizean livelihoods. We oppose doing so without a safety net for them. We oppose a bill that opens our borders wide without empowering our people to compete. And we call on the government to protect our farmers, the farmers from the Valley of Peace, the citrus growers down south in Pomona, our livestock farmers in Spanish Lookout, and our fishers from Monkey River to Sartineja. we urge the Senate to send a clear message. Belize must not be reduced to a mere consumer nation dependent on imports. We must remain a proud producer nation capable of feeding and sustaining our own and beyond. I therefore call for these amendments to this bill as outlined, and if those are included, I cannot in good conscience, Madam Speaker, say that we won't support it. So we support it with our recommendations for these amendments. Thank you, Madam President.
I recognize Senator Christopher Cowie.
Thank you, Madam President. Just a few comments in response to the comments of Senator Farber. As far as what have been the benefits, the UK and the EU CARIFORUM agreements provided for effectively immediate zero rating of duties being charged by those countries. So that was the immediate benefit. What these treaties provided for was then the phased-in introduction of or reduction of duties in Belize. So the benefits are there from the outset, and this was from 2008. Belizean exporters of goods to the EU, to the UK, have benefited by complete duty exemption. Now, in the case of Taiwan, we entered into that agreement back in just a few years ago, 2022, and it's the same. I think they had 113 goods that already benefit from immediate duty exemptions coming from Belize. In the case of Taiwan, our fisheries sectors stand to gain substantially. If you recall, the diplomatic relations having been discontinued between Taiwan and Nicaragua and Taiwan and Honduras over the past couple of years, they were major shrimp exporters to Taiwan. Yes, Belize has had its challenges with the early mortality disease in shrimp, but I think with new practices being undertaken by the shrimp industry, the production of shrimp locally is going up, and so we are able now to export in substantial quantities to Taiwan. I think we were going through a certification process for shrimp, but that is either completed or about to be completed, and that will open up substantial opportunities for our shrimp exporters from Belize. So we are already benefiting. In terms of lobster, we are already exporting lobster now to Taiwan. The prices that we get because of that duty exemption are above market prices, so our producers or exporters definitely benefit. The flip side now is in both sets of conventions or treaties. The flip side, yes, is that phase reduction in the importation from these areas. But that in itself, I would add as a further benefit. It's not a loss, but a further benefit, because it enables our importers that may be importing stuff, even let's say capital equipment, not just products for consumption, but it enables a reduced price that is possible for our local consumers or local investors. And it's not that those products that we would import are products that we produce. And on top of that, given the geographic realities of these jurisdictions, the shipping costs, in themselves would make a lot of importation of products, let's say like what you spoke about, the fruits and vegetables that we produce, prohibitive in terms of cost, even at 0% rates of duty. So in effect, I wouldn't say that it is a significant disadvantage to which we are put by these adjustments, but in fact we gain advantage because whereas we might be importing from the United States, for example, in which event we might be exposed to tariffs, we would be importing from these countries with lower tariffs, if not no tariffs. And so we have competitive substitutes that would support the management of our prices and keep inflation down. So there are these adjustments in fact provide benefits to us, not losses to us. What we do import generally is not as much the commodities. Belize is largely food secure and food self-sufficient in those commodities that those consumables that we produce. Where we have difficulties in processed foods, and that is an area where we need to support our local producers in development of processed foods. And I digress a bit, but the area of opportunity is actually in our GST and how we tax imported goods as opposed to incentivizing local production of goods in the taxation through GST. So that is an area I think that requires further effort, further analysis, but I think that is where in supporting local producers we can eliminate areas of what we would refer to as reverse discrimination. In terms of the recommendations, I think looking at what you refer to as impact assessment and support measures, no doubt it is useful to conduct the analysis. As I mentioned, in most of the areas where we're seeing the reduction in imports, it is unlikely that there would be any significant effect on our local production in terms of what we are currently producing. But nonetheless, the analysis should be done. And I don't know that there are amendments that are required to do that, but certainly from a policy standpoint, I think those are should be taken on board. With respect to supporting local industry, I know we always are on a back and forth on some of these project loans that the government undertakes from time to time. But these project loans, if you look into the components or details of these project loans, you will find that a number of them specifically address the concerns that you raised. So in the case of a loan, I think it was a couple years ago with the World Bank, call it the CRESAP loan. That loan, it was specific to especially MSMEs, but MSMEs in the agricultural sector and the tourism sector, but supporting them in terms of improving their technology or what we would say using climate smart agriculture technologies to improve their yields or their productive capacity. Those are existing project loans that are in place and through which farmers can access even grant funding to support their efforts. There's also the Blue Loan, the IDB Blue Economy Loan, that is there specifically to support the fisheries sector as well. And in a similar way, to improve their productive capacity and or diversify from what they are currently doing. So the recommendations certainly are taken on board, but I think those can be done on a policy basis. But they are in support of of what is already being done.
I recognize Senator Sheena Pitts.
Thank you, Madam President. I associate myself with Honorable Patrick Faber in supporting the bill. I do understand our commitment for our treaty obligations. I actually did a quick check as to the ramifications if we would not support it, and I can say that it wouldn't look good for us. It wouldn't look good for us at all. And so this is one of those ones where we oblige understanding our obligations as a country, as a nation, and in terms of how we interact with other countries globally in furtherance of trade. I'm wondering, considering that we understand, we agree, and we support, and when Senator Cowie said that there are things for policy, if I could lend to an additional consideration for policy, because I don't know, and it has not been said, that we have MSME volume/database that we have already assessed, in addition to our other local products and whatnot that will be going out for exportation that will match the foreign importation. Because having a cursory look at other Commonwealth nations that has identical treaty obligations, what they faced was the negative net fiscal effects from an increased importation and not equally balanced exportation. So I don't know whether or not we've made that assessment to see what we have locally that can rise to fill the gap. And what I've also checked in a cursory way is how other Commonwealth nations address that negative fiscal effect, and consistently across the board it has been done by taxation. And now that is alarming, and that in of itself does not mean that I don't support it, but on a policy level, what I rise to say is that what the government should consider, and I say this in taking into account what the IMF has said in their report, one of which is that the public debt, though down today, we need to fix pensions and broaden our tax base. And so what the IMF is signaling, what this will do is show us that where on the one hand we'll be losing revenue and the readily available fix is taxation, the IMF is saying that we have to use taxation to plug the gaps. On the policy level, I'm saying that where you identify areas for taxation, please, the burden shouldn't be on consumers. An area that comes to mind, readily available, though as a Caribbean nation, our way and method of socialization is through drinking and eating. The first area I could think of that I could rest easily to invite the kind of taxation would be what we consider sin taxes. Tax luxury items. Don't tax items that the average ordinary consumers who are already in the throes of struggling amidst inflation can't discharge. So it is a careful balance. Woe be unto us to know that we have to face inevitable taxation. It is good, and I compare the fact that we have an emerging market, MSME, I think you classify that as orange economy, goods going out to Taiwan. I'd like to, for the record, indicate that the deal brokered between Belize and Taiwan was done by the Honorable Tracy Tega Panton. She negotiated that. And so what I'm saying is that we need to find a way to, as Honorable Faber has said, pump into what we have here at the level where it would match foreign importation, because the trend is, the experience in all other countries and economies is that importation volumes rise, exportation almost not diminish, but it is not near the level of the importation, and that gap is what causes the government to lose revenue. And if we are to plug the gap of the lost revenue, when we go to tax, which the IMF said we should, and how other countries have been able to plug the gaps, all I'm saying is, on a policy level, sit down and look at areas that will not affect the ordinary average man. For those of you who enjoy a good whiskey or a good sherry, pay for it, but not let Belizeans have to pay for through the wazoo for something like corned beef that people rely on, that used to be dubbed poor people food, but by the cost of it on the shelves now it's questionable whether or not you could properly classify it as that. So in closing, I'm saying, Madam President, in addition to the recommendations made by Honorable Faber, is the recommendation that on a policy level, when attaching tax on goods, it should be attached to luxury items and not items that the average Belizeans need to survive. I yield.
Madam President, in closing the debate on this issue, I seek your permission to read into the record from the European Trade website, just so that we can be assured that this phase reduction of duties is not as ominous as one would think it is. I think, first of all, we have to recall the context in which this took place. We were moving from a situation where we had quota-free, tariff-free access, preferential trading arrangements for our commodities into the European Union, and that was coming to an end. And therefore, the situation was, well, what would be the trading relationship and the trading arrangements going forward? So at the time, the negotiations, and Senator Herrera, I believe, was at the Chamber of Commerce, as the boss of the Chamber of Commerce at the time. Senator Godwin Hulse was also a member of the National Trade Negotiating Commission at the time, which did all of the studies on these agreements and the negotiations which we undertook. So this is not something that there was very widespread consultation, Senator Faber, prior to these arrangements being finalized. So what replaced the preferential access was an economic partnership agreement. And as the European site says, it says the CARIFORUM EU Economic Partnership Agreement was signed in October 2008. It is not just a trade in goods agreement. It includes commitments on trade in services, investment, trade-related issues such as competition policy, government procurement, intellectual property, as well as sustainable development aspects. So it is a much bigger arrangement than just looking at phase reduction for export and import of goods. It also deals with investment. It deals with, as a matter of fact, there is culture, also a section on culture. There is government procurement, protection of intellectual property, and all these other dimensions. But as has been alluded to already, what we were facing was questionable market access to the European Union. What this agreement gave was replacing the preferential access with a stable and predictable access to the European market. On our side, there was a gradual opening up of our markets to the European Union products. As Senator Cowie indicated, the European Union immediately granted quota-free, duty-free access of our exports into the European Union, whilst we were given an opportunity for up to 25 years to liberalize our markets. Most important, Madam President, to emphasize to Senator Farber, the Economic Partnership Agreement includes several safeguards. To the extent that we find, or any of the countries find, that there is a surge in imports from the European Union that has a negative effect on our domestic producers, we are entitled to lift back up the tariff or to impose a quota. So these safeguards are available. Further, insofar as the policy issues that Senator Pitts was raising, there are regular stock taking done by the CARIFORUM Secretariat of what are the exports, what are the imports, what are the revenue losses on both sides, and to find out what is actually happening. The truth of the matter is, Madam President, where we need more work is on the investment side. Attracting more European Union investment in our countries, attracting more investment from Central America in Belize, so that we can do the manufactured goods that Senator Cowie referred to, that will then have duty-free, quota-free access to the European Union market. The long and short of it is that when one does the calibration, one has to look not only at how much revenue one has lost, but how much exports I have exported. 1, 2, how many jobs does it support? 3, how much of economic stimulation is taking place because we are producing things that are being exported to the European Union or to Taiwan. Let's just take the aquaculture. Without access to the Taiwanese market at the moment, or let me put it differently, the availability of the Taiwanese market at premium prices is a boon to our producers who are getting back on their feet after years of diseases. They now have available a very attractive market that is available to them under the Economic Cooperation Agreement with Taiwan. So, Senator Farber, Senator Pitts, the situation is that all the measures that you spoke about and the extended timelines, we have up to 25 years in this phase reduction. The safeguards are available to protect domestic producers. And the analysis, there is a regular stock taking built into the agreement to analyze what is the revenue effect on the trading relationship. So, Madam President, as we said at the very beginning, this is something that has been going on for just now about 17 years, and our commitment to the phase reduction is agreed. And I would encourage senators to take a closer look at the actual goods that we are reducing the tariffs on. These are not things that are produced in the main in Belize, in fact the whole Caribbean. These are not things, there are incidentally exclusion lists. There are lists that CARIFORUM has put up that we will never grant any tariff reduction on these specific areas, and there are others where the period of liberalization is much longer. So I don't think this constitutes a threat to our national development or to our exporters or private sector. I think we have to spend more time and more effort on looking to see how we can take advantage of the opportunities on the investment side and on the export side. Madam President, I ask that the question be put.
Honorable members, the question is that the bill for an act to amend the Customs and Excise Duties Act, Chapter 48 of the Laws of Belize Revised Edition 2020 to implement the 11th phase of reduction of duties in accordance with the CARIFORUM EU Economic Partnership Agreement to implement the 11th phase of reduction of duties in accordance with the CARIFORUM UK Economic Partnership Agreement to implement the second and third phase of the reduction of duties in accordance with the Belize and Republic of China, Taiwan Economic Cooperation Agreement, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto, be read a second time. All those in favor kindly say aye. Aye. Those against kindly say no. The ayes have it.
Bill for an act to amend the Customs and Excise Duties Act, Chapter 48 of the Laws of Belize.
I recognize the Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I rise to move a second reading of a bill for an act governing the insolvency of companies with mechanisms established for insolvent persons to enter into arrangement with their creditors, an administration procedure for companies, the receivership of companies and foreign companies, liquidation of companies, foreign companies, limited partnerships and partnerships, the making of bankruptcy orders against individuals, the licensing and regulation of insolvency practitioners, the penalization and redress of wrongdoing associated with insolvent persons, the disqualification of directors, the avoidance of certain transactions, cross-border insolvency issues, netting and establishment of a simplified insolvency procedure for eligible companies, and other matters connected therewith. Madam President, this bill is approximately 430 pages long. Senator Cowie organized a session with the FSC to educate colleague senators on its provisions and how it is intended to work. The long and short of it is that the government has taken a decision at the instance, in many ways, of the private sector, of the financial sector as well, to modernize our insolvency legislation. As it stands, Madam President, if a person is in financial distress or a company is in financial distress at this time, under our existing laws, there is very little flexibility. Banks have to make demands, they have to sue, they have to sell people's property. If a person has a particular difficulty because they have lost a job or their business is not doing well at a particular time, and they go into a financial institution and says, I need an extension on my loan, or I need the monthly payment, quarterly payment to be reduced, there is no provision in our law, if the financial institution says we do not agree, for that person to go to court and say to the court, I am going through a couple of years of difficulties, but here is a plan that I have. I'm going to recover if I'm given time. There is nothing in our law that allows that. Similar, and not only for a business, but for a person or an individual. In the result, businesses go under, people lose their homes, people lose their cars in difficult times, or they transfer things to friends, they don't register things, they hide from process servers who are seeking to get their property so that they can be sold. What this legislation does at every level is to provide regimes for working out businesses and individuals who are facing financial distress. And it provides a comprehensive scheme with the assistance and involvement of the court to ensure that proposals for rebuilding, proposals for working out financial problems are supervised by the courts, and people are given an opportunity, rather than just closing your doors and forgetting it, to go to your creditor and say, listen, I need time, I need an opportunity to, some more money to work out the problem I'm facing. At the same time, Madam President and Senators, where a business has failed and is obviously failing, the legislation sets out the regime that would apply where a business has to be liquidated, where a business has to be wound up, how assets are distributed, how creditors are paid, how employees are protected, etc. So it is a comprehensive regime that needs to be utilized in our economy as we continue to grow the economy. Now, the last point I make in opening is there are many parts to this legislation. Senators have already been told that it will not, and I repeat, it will not be implemented all at the same time. It will be phased in as we have the administrative and institutional framework in place to facilitate the implementation of the different provisions. Madam President and Senators, members of the FSC are here and will be available to the Senate for any clarifications in committee.
I recognize Senator Patrick Faber.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Let me begin by reiterating a point that I made earlier in gratitude to Senator Koyi, who I understand and the leader of government business just reiterated, held an informative session for senators to get a better understanding of this very, very, very lengthy piece of legislation. While I myself was not able to attend, Senator Pitts attended on behalf of the opposition and was very instrumental in helping in our caucus for us to get a better understanding of the intent and of some of the amelioration attempts, if I could use that terminology, to describe how the bill will be brought into effect. But, of course, Madam President, we have some very, very serious concerns. And again, before we are misunderstood, let me put on the record that we believe that this is a piece of legislation that we can absolutely support. But, of course, that comes with the recommendations that we will make throughout the debate today. We begin, Madam President, by saying that we absolutely agree that we need to modernize, if you will, the insolvency laws in this country. We have seen where many issues have arisen and they have not done well for those who are involved. The laws do not do well for those who are involved. But the first thing that we want to highlight here, Madam President, is, or I said we need to modernize, so I guess that's the first point. The second point is that this bill is very complex. It's very complex, and the bill, if you look at it, Senator Courtney said 430 pages, the electronic version would tell me 350 something, so I suppose there's, but that even makes it worse. 430 odd pages, and it has, Madam President, more than 500 clauses. It is, for many who would look at it, a labyrinth, Madam President, of legal jargon and administrative requirements. And in a country where our people are very, very simplistic, even if this bill was 25 pages, you'd have people who have problems with it. Especially those who cannot afford to get the kind of legal advice or professional support in understanding what the legislation requires them to do. And so, in that regard, the new bill immediately, Madam President, becomes an obstacle in many regards because it's just very complex to navigate. We have seen, Madam President, how small business owners right now, as I've said, struggle to comply with the economic substance and beneficial ownership registry requirements. Adding this massive burden will only drive more Belizeans out of the formal economy in our view. And again, it is not to say that we can't fix it. We're just showing what we believe is the immediate perception. Certainly it is our first view of it, but it is definitely going to be the very same view that other entities, small businesses especially, will have of this piece of legislation. The bill, Madam President, grants sweeping powers to administrators and liquidators. They can freeze accounts, they can seize property, and they can even compel directors to appear and surrender their records. That's our understanding. Take, for example, the experience, and we'll use real-life Belize examples, the example of the nationalization and compensation disputes involving BTL. During that period, the government and foreign advisors engaged in asset oversight and negotiations. Local directors and employees felt immediately that they were sidelined, they were intimidated, and unable to contest decisions that directly affected their livelihood. The bill, Madam President, risks formalizing such top-down, heavy-handed interventions as standard practice, leaving Belizean small businesses, Belizean entrepreneurs vulnerable to abuse. And then, Madam President, there is the issue of workers and small creditors being left behind. The bill does not clarify, does not clearly prioritize the claims of workers for severance. It does not clearly prioritize the claims for unpaid salaries. It does not clearly prioritize for pension contributions, nor, Madam President, does it protect the small local suppliers, the vegetable farmers, the shopkeepers, the service providers who depend on timely payments to survive. Another case right here, Madam Speaker, in our country is the case of CPBL, where small citrus farmers and workers waited endlessly for settlements while the large creditors were the first ones in line. This bill, Madam President, risks us repeating those errors all over again and entrenching the injustices that came along with it. The bill, Madam President, focuses heavily on liquidation and asset seizure, but offers little to encourage restructuring or business recovery. There are no tax incentives, no debt workout support, and no linkages to MSME aid programs like those offered by Beltrade. During COVID-19, Madam President, we saw countless small hotels, tour operators, restaurants. We saw them collapse, Madam President, because they had no means or guidance or restructuring. Rather than help these businesses get back on their feet, this bill will risk pushing them straight into liquidation. The threat, Madam President, of harsh penalties is also a major concern for us. Harsh penalties, director disqualifications, personal liabilities will deter Belizeans from taking business risks. We already witnessed in 2021 how hotel operators in San Pedro considered mass closures over compliance fears. Such threats, Madam President, push our entrepreneurs further into informality and stifle innovation. And then there is the problem that we endure a lot in this country, Madam President, which is weak oversight. We make laws, but we have absolutely no ways of enforcing them and ensuring that, there is oversight. The bill, if you look at it, relies heavily on financial services, on the Financial Services Commission and the courts. Both already, I'm sure the judiciary will tell you, very much overstretched. There is no independent insolvency tribunal, Madam President, or any kind of ombudsman to review the administrator's actions. We saw the consequence of oversight failures during Social Security Board loan disputes, leading to diminished public confidence. And then, Madam President, there is the issue of cross-border risks. And parts 18 and 19 of this bill open the door for foreign liquidators to enforce judgments and control Belizean assets directly. We must remember that strong national resistance during the Belize Bank arbitration case. Do we want to surrender that sovereignty and risk putting local jobs and community assets in foreign hands? I think not. And then, Madam President, finally there is the bill's harsh penalties, including the imprisonment for failing to file documents or keep proper accounts. This, Madam President, is by far the most frightening thing of all. In a country where most of our small businesses do not have advanced accounting systems, these provisions risk criminalizing mistakes and administrative errors. Madam President, as we indicated a while ago, we are prepared to support, but we also wish to share some recommendations that could be used as amendments to the bill. And it basically comes from the same points I made just now, but these are just concrete recommendations, hoping it can be made easy. Yes, I do have a copy that I can place on the record, Madam President, that colleagues can see, and I can certainly share it electronically with the clerk. Our first recommendation then would be to improve worker and small creditor protection by amending Section 207. And we would amend it, Madam President, by allowing for employees to make claim for unpaid wages, severance pay, pension contributions, and that it be ranked, those things be ranked as priority over all secured and unsecured assets, including floating charges, except for statutory fees and liquidation costs. To this same issue, Madam Speaker, Madam President, we also recommend an amendment to Section 208, claims by unsecured creditors, by inserting the terminology that claims by small suppliers or service providers with an aggregate exposure to the debtor not exceeding 100,000 Belize dollars shall be treated as preferential claims and rank immediately after employee claims. Our second concern that I raised, Madam President, had to do with independent oversight, and we recommend the following amendment to fix that issue or to help the issue. That is the inserting a new section, we can refer to it as Section 112A under Part 3, Administration. there shall be established an insolvency review tribunal appointed by the Chief Justice in consultation with the Attorney General, composed of 3 persons with expertise in insolvency, commercial law, and MSME finance. 2, the tribunal shall hear and determine complaints against administrators, liquidators, or receivers. 3, the tribunal shall have power to suspend, reverse, or amend any administrative action as deemed appropriate. And 4, appeals from tribunal decisions shall lie to the Court of Appeal. Of course, these are just our recommendations. It doesn't have to be like that. The idea is that there is an independent entity that an appeal could be made to. A third amendment we're proposing, based on the comments I made earlier, Madam President, is that there ought to be some kind of MSME rescue framework. And to do that, we are recommending an amendment to Section 283 to establish, or that section is the establishment of simplified debt restructuring program, and we're recommending the insertion after subsection 1, subsection 1A, that should read, or that could read, this part shall specifically apply to micro, small, and medium enterprises as defined in the Belize MSME Policy 2022. MSMEs accepted into this program shall have access to government-backed restructuring funds, tax relief, and technical assistance administered in coordination with Beltrade and relevant agencies. And the insertion of a new section 283A, 1, where it could read, the minister may establish financial support mechanisms including grants, loans, and tax incentives to facilitate MSME debt restructuring plans approved under this part. And 2, the Financial Services Commission shall coordinate with MSME agencies to ensure technical support and public awareness. A fourth area that I spoke of, Madam President, is penalty reform. And to this end, we recommend an amendment to Section 405 for non-disclosure. And we are recommending the insertion of a new subsection 3, where non-disclosure arises from inadvertent or administrative error and does not involve fraud or intentional concealment, and the penalty shall be limited to a civil fine not exceeding 10,000 Belize dollars, along with a requirement for corrective filing within 30 days of notice. I don't have to get jail time and all of that. We also recommend an amendment to Section 247 and 248, which deals with fraudulent and insolvent trading. We recommend the insertion, clarification, that could read, imprisonment shall apply only where there is proven fraudulent intent. That's what I just your concern. Sorry, Madam President. Imprisonment shall apply only where there is proven fraudulent intent. In the absence of fraud, administrative or negligent acts shall be subject to civil penalties only. And lastly, Madam President, I spoke of cross-border protections that are needed, and so to that end, we recommend an amendment to Section 462, application for recognition of foreign proceeding, by inserting a subsection 4. No foreign representative shall be recognized or permitted to act in Belize unless a majority of a locally convened creditors committee has expressly approved such recognition in writing. We recommend as well an amendment to Section 468, which has to do with relief upon recognition, by inserting subsection 3. Before granting relief under this section, the High Court shall require proof that local employees and unsecured creditors have been given notice and an opportunity to be heard. No order adversely affecting local priority claims shall be granted without their explicit consent. I must say, Madam President, that we were driven to make this kind of recommendation again based on what I am told by my colleague senator on this side, and the government senators on that side continue to make me want to believe, and they have not done anything to prove me otherwise, or to prove to me that it is not so. That if we are as specific as possible, if we make good recommendations, and those recommendations make sense for the benefit of the legislation, for the ultimate benefit of our nation, that they will be embraced. I say again, this kind of thing doesn't happen in the House, and so I would not have done that, except in committee maybe, when the experts do come in from the various stakeholder groups. But normally once Cabinet wants something, it's sent through and pushed through, and whatever amendments House members, especially in the opposition side, who are the ones who pay attention, because those that are in on the government side know that it is just a course of nature that they have to go through, especially those in Cabinet who, of course, were already sworn to upholding what the bill is recommending, and they're bonded by their allegiance to Cabinet. It would be left up to the opposition to make the kind of recommendations. But I am hopeful, Madam President, as I am encouraged to be by my colleague Senator Pitts and others on the other side, that these recommendations, specific as they are, will be given due consideration in order to improve the bill. I thank you, Madam President.
I recognize Senator Kevin Herrera.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, we've had the opportunity to meet with Senator Coy at the Central Bank a couple weeks ago, and he went into great detail, him and a team from the FSC, taking us through the entire bill. We've also had some chance internally to look at the bill itself, Madam President. And basically, the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Bill, Madam President, introduces a comprehensive framework for addressing the insolvency and bankruptcy, incorporating many of the principles for effective insolvency regimes advocated by the World Bank. And so basically what we're looking at, Madam President, is a move to modernize the current Bankruptcy Bill Act that we have in place. This was enacted in 1902, and I think it was amended some 26 years ago. And so if you look at it from that perspective, Madam President, you'll see that the current act that we have in place is extremely, extremely outdated. What this bill does is the bill demonstrates a significant move towards modern insolvency practices that balances creditor rights with debtor rehabilitation and market efficiency. Since 1998, Madam President, when the last amendment was done, insolvency law in common law jurisdiction has evolved to come to terms with the cumbersome nature of the processes and its adverse impacts on potentially viable businesses who are in temporary financial distress. And so I heard what the leader of the opposition business said, Senator Farber mentioned, but in many respects it's doing somewhat the opposite of that in many respects. What it's doing actually is balancing and incorporating some of the rights of that debtors will have in the process. And so that's certainly a welcome move in terms of this legislation in front of us. The Insolvency and Bankruptcy Bill 2025 appears to be largely consistent with the World Bank principles for effective insolvency and creditor-debtor regimes. It establishes a modern and comprehensive framework, Madam President, that prioritizes rehabilitation and efficient resolution, incorporates robust governance and oversight, and addresses international insolvency aspects, including simplified procedures for smaller entities. So conceptually, we really don't have an issue with the bill, Madam President. We feel like it's going in the right direction. Where we'd have some concerns, and perhaps Senator Courtney will be able to enlighten us on this, is that where this is going, there'll be a tremendous, there could be an increased interactions with the courts in terms of resolving issues. And so we're hoping that the capacity in the legal and judicial systems will be at the level that it can efficiently discharge the duties that this bill will bring in place. And so that is basically the major concern we would have. You know, how would this work? I mean, there'll be tremendous there'll be, rather than just banks and the debtor handling it, they'll be going to the courts to seek redress under this current legislation. And so we wonder if the courts will have the technical capacity to deal with this bill once it is passed, if they will have the personnel available, if it will even be timely, Madam President. And so these would be some extremely important concerns going into it. I mean, it's a robust bill. It has many features in all aspects of insolvency and bankruptcy. And we believe that persons will seek redress in one way or the other in terms of whenever they encounter a situation where they run into financial issues and need to rely on this act. But it's important, I believe, that the courts will and the legal system will have the capacity to address those. Thank you.
I recognize Senator Sheena Pitts.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise to support the bill in part. I said that quickly, eh? And I said it quickly because I am duty-bound to point out those areas in which the government can strengthen this bill. Madam President, this is it. You hear about 431 pages and 520 sections. This is it. It is dense. It places a burden, like Senator Herrera has said, not only on the judiciary and practitioners, but also on any person or entity that will come into contact with the subject matter of the bill. And absent from the considerations of the FSC is sensitization and training to not only stakeholders who will come into contact with the subject matter of the bill, but also this new charted category of insolvency professionals, practitioners. And so why I say I partially support is that because of the subject matter, it is incumbent on the FSC to enjoin with the government to do the kind of sensitization and training to stakeholders and professionals. Now, I understand the bill to represent improvement, and it's good, you know. It's modernizing, and it takes into consideration the United Nations Commission on International Trade Law. And from checking it has shown that this bill represents about 80 to 90% adoption of the Procedural. So that is good. When I look at the bill and I go through the parts, and let me tell you, it was oppressive for me to stand here and make a presentation on the entirety of this. Madam President, not even I would invite you to give me more than the 45 minutes or the hour that I would not even meet the requirement for. But the first thing that jumps out to me is that the bill is so heavily centered on the involvement of the High Court. And when the discussion happened between our chambers and the FSC touted that that is one of the attractive features to buy into the bill, because we know that there will have High Court involvement to ensure that the spirit of the bill is followed. And so I looked at whether or not the High Court is equipped currently to address immediately upon the passage of the bill. And safe to say that, separate and apart from general application of insolvency proceedings, that is the extent to which the judiciary is ready. But for the kind of treatment and the kind of provisions made herein, there is specialized training that the judiciary needs that it does not have. To go even further, when looking at other jurisdictions like Singapore, Canada, UK, they have actually carved out specialized forums or courts. Even if it is not independent of, at least there is identified within their High Court, Supreme Court, etc., a judicial officer who specializes in matters like these. And so I look at what we had here, what we have here in Belize. We have the JEI Institute, Judicial Education Institute training. However, that training is primarily on anti-money laundering and fraud, criminal mediation, judgment writing and sentencing. None of that is geared towards insolvency matters, so to speak. And then I look regionally to see if there is any regional training that our High Court has accessed. And we partnered with the Jurist Project, and the Chief Justice was a former chairperson of the Eastern Caribbean Judicial Education Institute, and it promotes judicial training and peer learning. But again, there is nothing within that project framework that is specific towards the training that is necessary to effect this bill. And so I look to international training. So there is a program, INSOL, a judicial insolvency program, that is developed by the World Bank, offering online and classroom training on insolvency and restructuring principles for judges in emergency jurisdiction. That is not Belize specific, but our judges could enroll in these online modules and invite tailored classroom modules to be delivered locally. So locally we don't have it, regionally we don't have it, but there is an opportunity, a possibility internationally. And what I am saying is that the FSC was so kind enough to say that it has its own money for implementation, which is good. So then I say, I task them with the responsibility to fund the training of the High Court so that the High Court is equipped to address the subject matter of the bill. Now, that is on the one hand. So we need to be able to ensure that the judiciary is equipped to handle matters of the bill in any complex way, and not just wait. The FSC indicated that it will take him about 6 months to be ready to move on implementation of the bill. And so one of the main features of most bills that we see when we come to this chamber is that it relies on corollary or collateral documents, for example, regulations that don't accompany the bill. And in this case, this bill provides for heightened or strong FSC supervision and oversight, which come by way of regulations. But we don't have the regulations to see how that will work. And so I've heard Senator Courtney at that time indicate that, oh, that's okay, we always legislate this way. We pass the bill and the regulations come later, but when we end that bad practice? And in this case, the regulations are so necessary because what is silent from the bill is the mechanisms of supervision from the FSC. So, for example, Senator Farber made reference to the offense-creating sections and penalties, but we don't have in the bill what enforcement mechanisms there are. Now, the bill exists in both a criminal and civil type of way, and we understand that when it comes to the criminal aspect, it is the Department of Public Prosecutions that will prosecute criminal offenses. But, well, that is what the bill is suggesting. But we don't have, we don't have yet in the bill any indication as to what relationship between the FSC and the DPP will be, and who will be or who bears the burden of investigation. We don't know whether it will be primarily the FSC or any involvement of the police department that ordinarily deals with crime. There is a gray area on that, and that needs improvement. Another area I considered is the fact that when we look at sections, what the bill touts is cross-border management, which is good. Surprisingly, though, it does not define certain centers of main interest in relation to companies. The acronym is COMI, Center of Main Interest. And when you look at other legislation that deals with this same subject matter, they are sure to define how, or assist the court, how they determine COMI, Center of Main Interest. Things like the location or headquarters of the business, main business operation, the creditor knowledge of, and the location of key assets, place where the main creditors are located, or the jurisdiction most recognizable to creditors, stakeholders, things like that. So what the bill should do, or a recommendation, is that in the, I think it's section, between section 464 onwards, is attempt to define center of main interest and list the criteria to assess center of main interest so that the court is able to determine matters in that regard. Another area for recommendation is that there is no clear express provision for alternative dispute resolution. Now, there is provision that parties could come together to agree and resolve, subject to going to court to have that agreement effected. And while that is not frowned upon. The thing is, there is no creation or space for any quasi-judicial entity to engage. In the High Court framework, there is provisions for mediation and arbitration, but that is having entered the High Court system. And the suggestion is that the bill should on its own create a mechanism for that with not necessarily judicial officers, and that space could then meet and sync with the fact that in the bill it provides that agreements can be reached and it can be perfected by the court. So what I'm saying is, let it stand on its own independently, or create provisions for it to stand on its own independently without having to go to court, and that there should be identified quasi-judicial experts, well, I don't want to say experts, but practitioners who would be able to accomplish just that. Now, there are, like I said, several things in the bill that I can comment on, but I wouldn't want to burden the session with it, because I don't want the impression to be made that I am against the bill or the bill is not good, because, like I said, it is an adoption largely of United Nations Commission on International Trade Law. The last provision in the bill reads, if I may be permitted, Madam President, this Act shall come into force on a date appointed by the Minister by order published in the Gazette. Subsection 2 says, an order under subsection 1 may appoint different dates for the commencement of different provisions of this Act. And I say that to follow up on what the leader of government business indicated, but that to go a step further, in the meeting with the FSC, I inquired specifically. We appreciate that passing the bill means that it won't be in operation for some time. So then, identify the parts that needs to take immediate effect to get going. When the supplemental material was shared, I didn't see that. And I'm hoping that what the government can do is stand down on the bill so that we can identify those parts which needs immediate effect and pass those parts, do the phase approach for those parts, and then the other parts that will come later on in the year, identify the dates for that. Because what we should not do is pass a law to take effect when we do not have the mechanism or environment to address it, and that would be a shortcoming. It is very... Another area I forgot to say about what is troubling, I think we should look at, is how secured and unsecured creditors are treated. My reading of it, there seems to be an imbalance between the two, and an ambiguity where I invite further discussion on those two, the provision that deals with secured creditors and unsecured creditors. What is also short in the bill, and why I suggest that we stay voting on it, identify the areas, is because in modernizing, what is silent from the bill is any digitization platform. It is not stated. There is no express provision that makes for online application, online supervision, online updating, online storage of database. There is nothing like that, and I feel like that is a significant oversight, considering that this is a modernization effort, but a modernization effort that is absent digital considerations is I would want to say and rest on it being an oversight. The other thing is, when we met with the FSC, I had asked about how going forward and implementing or getting ready to implement would work, and the FSC indicated that they would identify a project manager to do somewhat of a roadmap type thing, and I understand all of that, but there is no clear indication at this moment that there is the necessary administrative support within the FSC to handle some of the areas that is being introduced. So then I would like, it would really be helpful to see that passing the bill is done at a time when we have the mechanism and the structures to make the bill a reality. And it would be remiss of me to indicate that, because those things could be hindrance to implementation, and where we can appreciate that immediate implementation is not possible, let's immediately implement, if you will, those areas that are possible. I recall querying on the cross-border relationship of insolvency proceedings, and I did check because I thought at that time we might be creating an environment where it would have been easier to seek relief outside and then come and ask for the country or a jurisdiction to recognize it. But when I went through the bill, I was able to see that even in those circumstances, it is not automatic, and there is still a process you have to go through. So I'm relieved to see that. So when Senator Guerra indicated that there would have been some codification of reading the provisions, it is not, I don't read it that way, because it still preserves our court's jurisdiction to treat, and it still does appreciate that our court has no jurisdiction over what happens outside the country. So, crave your indulgence, Madam President. I'd just like to conclude by saying that we can and should do a phased approach to the bill, and we should do that taking into considerations where the shortcomings are, and that FSC, being a body responsible to generate its own revenue, that it should be put to task to facilitate that. There is no registry of receivers as yet, and I think immediately one of the things that should be done is identify all existing receivers and receiverships to assess, because that is one of the responsibilities of the FSC in supervision that has not been done. And then there is another area, the moratorium. There is no defined period for the moratorium, and I find that there's pros and cons to it, but it should come with some provision that at least provides a window period for moratorium, because how the provisions are written, moratoriums can last for a year, 2 years, 3 years, especially since the bill relies heavily on the court's involvement. And during moratoriums, parties are restricted from doing certain things, and that could read as counterintuitive to moving forward in insolvency and bankruptcy proceedings. So with a court system that already as it is oppressed with backlogs and its own constraints, we should try our best to identify quasi-judicial persons to deal with certain areas, in addition to making things more defined so that there is no period of suspense in this area. Like I said, Madam President, there is much more that I would have loved to do, but this bill being so